Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an NPC bodybuilder and trainer. Today's guest is Bryan Troianello. Bryan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing awesome, man. I apologize. I think I slaughtered your last name. It's a tough one, man.
It's Troianello.
There we go.
Yeah, it's a nightmare, man. When I was a kid growing up, trying to spell it over the phone and stuff, feel bad for my kids, but it's okay.
Yeah. So anyways, Bryan, I am thankful and excited to have you on the podcast, man. And we're going to talk life. We're going to talk bodybuilding. I know you're several weeks out from the national, so I'm excited to chop it up about that. And we're just going to get after it, man. The first question I have for you, Bryan, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
All time. I think the first bodybuilder that I ever saw in a magazine, it was like, I want to look like that, was Dorian Yates. It was one of those black and white photos of him doing a lat spread. And so definitely a big Dorian Yates fan. And the beginning of my training is definitely lower volume. Big Jay Cutler fan, big Lee Labrada fan. Cool. Ended up knowing him personally. Everybody loves Ronnie Coleman and Branch Warren and Kevin Levrone. Just a big bodybuilding fan, but those are definitely my top guys.
So, if I understand you correctly, Dorian Yates was kind of the first pro bodybuilder that you kind of saw in a magazine or a poster or something? Yeah,
when I was a kid, probably middle school, and saw that and was like, wow, I want my back to look like that. And it was that black and white lat spread where it just, took up the whole page. So
for sure, man. Yeah. Dorian Yates is actually the kind of I was my childhood mentor, who taught me how to lift weights. He won Mr. America back in 1975. So he wasn't an IFBB pro, but he was very heavily involved in the AAU back in the 60s and 70s. So outside of Ralph, Dorian Yates was kind of that first guy that I saw, I think, in a magazine. And it was just he had just finished up his Olympia reign, retired. And then in 98, obviously Ronnie Coleman won, but so I'm right with you, man. Dorian Yates was kind of that first IFBB pro that I kind of saw and was like, that's something different for sure. So
yeah, it's so foreign from anything,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, and I've had several, guests on where they kind of talk about, the Arnold movies. They talk about comic books. They talk about, the WWF and the action figures. And that's something even for myself. It's I think we're probably both in our 30s. So it's when we were growing up, we did have the Arnold and the Stallone movies, right? And we had our action figures that were jacked. And nowadays it kind of seems it's kind of more watered down in terms of movies with jack guys and even the action figures, but we had a lot of exposure to that. And I think that played into a lot of us wanting to be jacked when we were kids and when we grew up. So, Bryan,
I remember watching He-Man and stuff, and Saturday morning, the X-Men, where it actually followed the timeline of the comic, which is cool that it's on Disney Plus now. I can make my daughters watch it and try to get them into it, instead of watching Mickey Mouse House and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure, man. So, Bryan, that kind of leads us into the second question. At what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
Probably I'd say middle school time. So what's that, 12, 13, and it was for sports. I played soccer, and then I played lacrosse, and I swam all the way through high school. The person who, my dad definitely got me into lifting weights because we had a pretty decent setup in our basement growing up. We had dumbbells up to 100, a rack. We had old York bar, which is probably still one of the best bars I've ever used. and like a dip station that like I made, and like a pull-up stuff. So I get like a decent workout in there, and like a cable setup. But also like my uncle has like a pretty serious gym in his basement, and he really got me into lifting too. So between those two, that's how I got into weightlifting. And I was always like good at sports, but because I was like good at training, right? So like skill wise, I was like, okay, but I was always like the fastest and strongest kid, because I would always like, if I didn't have a game the next day, I would like go home or go to Gold's Gym and go train. Even if I like played a game, I'd still like go and work out and stuff.
So how did your dad and uncle get into strength training?
I don't know. Actually, my dad got into it. I do know, because his roommate in college was Howie Long. He went to Villanova, so he like lifted in college. And my uncle, I don't know. That's a good question. He's quite a bit younger than my dad, so I don't know. So he actually married my dad's sister, so not his brother. That makes sense.
So your dad's roommate in college was Howie Long. Does your dad have some pretty good stories about that or not?
He's got a couple between like him, and because they like lived in a suite with like him and a couple other football guys, and he didn't actually play football, but he hung out with like him and his friend Kenny and Mark, and he's got some good stories about that in college and stuff.
I'm sure, man. That's kind of cool. So, all right, Bryan. So you just kind of brought up sports. I kind of want to just transition into your backstory a little bit more. So where did you grow up? Just talk about the influence of sports on your life. Talk about maybe that connection with your parents, any siblings, anything that kind of stands out in your mind from childhood up to about high school, and then we'll move on from there.
Sure. I grew up in New Jersey, Warren, New Jersey. So it's like north central Jersey. And I played, like I said, lacrosse, soccer, and swam. And lacrosse was, and soccer were really more my sports. I have two brothers. I'm the oldest. I live in Texas now. That's because my wife's from Texas, so we moved here because of that. What else did you ask me? Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine, man. You're fine. Just talk about your childhood a little bit. I mean, obviously sports was a big influence. What was your relationship with like with your parents? What did they kind of maybe instill in you?
I mean, I still am really close with my parents. That's honestly the hardest part about moving to Texas, is being away from them. You know, they're still together, and my brothers are still up there. And in terms of like sports wise, it was, you know, they made me play a sport every season. And I think that was a good idea, because it kept me out of trouble, you know, because you can only party so hard if you have to go play a game the next day. So that was definitely a good call. You know, I had a really good childhood. I can't complain. Like I said, I grew up in Jersey, got two brothers. I'm the oldest. Got in a little bit of trouble, but not too much trouble. So
what was something that your parents growing up kind of instilled in you, or what was kind of like their focus? Where you said they kind of put you in sports. Was education something else that they pushed pretty hard? What was that main influence from your parents?
Definitely. From the beginning, it was, you know, you have to do at least this well in school, and you have to play a sport every season. And as long as you maintain that, then they were pretty laissez-faire. And, you know, I think that's, for me, that was a good approach, because then when I went off to college and was on my own, I didn't like, you know, freak out or anything. Where I saw like other people, my roommate this is a good example, that he was like very coddled. And when he went to college, he kind of just like free and freaked out and ended up flunking out of school. But so, you know, I don't think that works for everybody, but I think for me, that worked really well. Like I said, it was do at least this well in school and play sports and don't get in trouble, and kind of ended up doing what I wanted because of that. So
cool. No, that's good, man. Cause I think I was definitely one of those kids that went off to college, and not necessarily because I was sheltered, but definitely partied hard, So, now,
it makes it like being a father now, like, how do I raise my children? Right. And, especially with the current environment that we're in, it's really like, she's crying now. It's really tough to navigate, because really what's going to end up happening is there's so much influence from everybody else. So you want to expose your children to as much as possible, but also you don't want them to experience certain things at certain times. And so, you have to be somewhat hands off, right? And trust that they're going to end up being responsible enough, but also being aware of what's going on, right? So, because they have to, at some point, be able to take care of themselves, right?
For sure. So since we're already there, we'll come back into your story, but you have 2 kids, and why don't you just talk about how, when your firstborn was born, how did that change your life? And then just from the day-to-day mindset, having a couple of kids, being a dad, what does that do for you? What does that mean to you? How does that kind of alter your life from the day to day?
It changes your life completely. And it's really hard to explain to anybody unless they have children, right? Do you have any kids?
I don't.
Yeah, it's hard to explain to somebody how much it changes your life. I have 2 girls. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And it puts everything in perspective and makes you understand that, what's important, what's not important, what is easy, what's hard, talking about prep for this show. And it's easier with children because you're distracted the whole time, and also are you tired? I'm tired, but I have 2 little kids. I'd be tired anyway. I don't know if it's because I have kids or because I'm in a deficit. I'd be tired anyway, right? And also just, everything that you do is not for yourself anymore. It's for somebody else, and trying to move in that direction and try to, sorry, she's crying.
I honestly can't really hear her, so it's all good.
Oh, well, then we'll just ignore that. Because it and, you just want to expose them to everything and teach them everything, right? So, yeah, it changes your perspective on everything, and what's important and what's not important. And, if something bad happens to you, you don't necessarily care as much, especially things that you can't control, right? Maybe before children, you get upset about something that absolutely has no control over yourself. You have no control over it all, right? But in reality, if you don't have any control over it, you really shouldn't get upset about it, because it's nothing you could have done about it in the first place. You just need to move past it. And those kind of perspectives and stuff, I think you become more aware of when you have children.
Do you want me to pause this? Do you want to go check on your daughter?
Yeah, give me a sec.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. So go ahead.
Sorry about that. It's supposed to be nap time, but
real life, man. And it's kind of ironic because we were just talking about fatherhood and everything. So,
Yeah. I know.
All right. So let's kind of take a step back into your story then. When you graduated high school, what happened after that? What were you kind of planning on doing, and how did kind of life unfold post high school?
Sure. Ended up going to Drexel University, which is in Philadelphia. And I majored in finance and economics, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. And Drexel, the way it's set up, you get internships. So I ended up interning at the end of it at JP Morgan, and worked there after I graduated as well, and just kind of hated it, to be honest with you. It just wasn't for me. And at that time, my father owns a software company, and the software runs warehouses. So everything that has to do with the warehouse, keeping track of everything, keeping track of every person, every item, shipping, all the automation, everything. And I started to work for him, and worked for him up until I moved to Texas. So stayed in Philadelphia, worked for him, traveled around the country, basically installing the software in warehouses. And then what I did was I would go to the company that was having a problem that needed software, and I would reorganize and restructure how they were doing things and show them how to use the software, and stay there for about 2 weeks and then go do something else, right? So did that for a couple of years. And that's when I met my wife in Philly, because she was in med school in Philly. And then she ended up doing her residency in Philadelphia, right outside Philadelphia. And then we're in Texas because her family's in Texas. So when she finished residency, it was either get a job in Texas or New Jersey near my family. And it was just a better opportunity down here in Houston. So that's why I ended up in Texas.
So did you enjoy doing the software stuff, or was it kind of a step back to JP Morgan where it was just kind of something you had to do to pay the bills?
I really enjoyed that for a couple of reasons. One was I got to spend a lot of time with my family and work directly with my dad. Also, it was really hard. It was a lot of problem solving, and I wasn't just sitting at a desk all day. It was actually like physically doing stuff and physically going places. And so I really liked that a lot. But then it got to and then at that period of time, it was when the economy was doing poorly. So he needed help too. And by the time that I left, now his company is doing well. So it was a big contributor of that growth as well, which is cool. And then, I always train people on the side. And I got to a point where I could do that full time. And last year, I just went for it and, had the opportunity to do that. And that's what I really enjoy doing the most. And even like competing and everything like that. I mean, I do love competing, and I do love the process, but it's really more so to be a better coach, because that's what I actually really do enjoy the most. So, and as long, competing wise, as long as it's fun, I continue to progress, I'm going to continue doing it forever, because it's not like, I'm not miserable. I have a good time doing it, and I'm not like shitty or anything. So as long as that's true, that makes sense.
For sure. Is it fair to say that you enjoy the training aspect of bodybuilding more than the competing, or is that not true?
Absolutely. I think everybody enjoys the training part better. Training part is definitely the better. I trained with some guys yesterday, and one of them is going to be a world record powerlifter, and I made him throw up in their leg training. So stuff like that, it's pretty satisfying. Being able to run people into the ground. So
now, you said you enjoyed the problem solving in terms of the software job. Is that something that you enjoy about training people and coaching people? It's kind of like, they come to you with maybe not the best experience, maybe with another trainer, another coach, and you kind of get to troubleshoot, you get to problem solve. And then there's also problem solving, obviously, within bodybuilding, when maybe things don't go your way, or things don't go, the way for a client or something on competition day. Is that an aspect of this whole bodybuilding experience, coaching, training, that you enjoy, that problem solving side of things, Bryan?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that would probably be the best part of the whole thing. And the reason why I like competing myself. So yeah, 100%.
So and how do you,
people that I have that are lifestyle people, those people are often the most enjoyable to help, because I help a bodybuilder. I talk to him for a couple months, then I don't see him for 6 months. Then I talk to him for a couple months, right? Some of these lifestyle people I help, they lose 50 pounds. They're with me forever, and I changed their life. I saved their life. Some of those people, so, and it was like, I'm eating more and moving more, and I feel better, and I'm less restricted. It's like, yeah.
So how do you go through, like, when it comes to problem solving within bodybuilding, let's say not necessarily for yourself, but for a client, what is that problem solving? Obviously it's going to be different for everybody, because everybody's got their own things, right? Their own issues, and different starting points. But what does that problem solving process kind of look like? Do you have like a blueprint? So if somebody's coming to you, kind of like, what is the first kind of steps in terms of a new client or, a new athlete that you're going to prep?
I think initially I have, like a questionnaire of things that I ask everybody, and it has to do with, how they're currently going about things, right? So how they're training, how they split their training up, the training style, even to like, how many sets and volume and stuff like that. Food, like how they're eating, how they're splitting their meals up, food they like, food they don't like, if they have any kind of allergies, how they're sleeping, their energy levels, where their stress is at, all those kind of questions. And every time they check in with me, they have to fill this out, right? So, I keep track of all of that, and with the pictures and the training, and then even most of the people I have them send me videos of them actually training, right? So I require them to send me the top sets of their exercises, and most of them, I'm dictating what they're actually doing, and then I'm sending them video back and critiquing their form and stuff like that. So most of the time it's, with that, I can figure out like what's the problem, right? So, when it terms like, why is this muscle underdeveloped, but I have other muscles that are, and then frequency, and then diet most of the time.
So
just like keeping track of everything. That's what I'm at, is keeping track of all the different data points. And that's the same thing with the software, right? It's keeping track of all the different data points and going from there.
How did you kind of go about learning how to coach or train people? Was it just kind of trial and error? Did you have kind of an influence or a mentor? What did that look like?
In terms of training people, it's all trial and error. I do have some friends that I bounce ideas off of, but I think it's just other aspects of my life that have carried over. Like, I have finance degree, and, with the software company, and just how I've gone through life being analytical, it just carried over into this, right? So it was really like, I've always been this way, collecting data and being detailed oriented, and it just fits well with bodybuilding, right? Especially like if you're doing a contest prep, because you're dictating the volume, you need to lower the volume when your recovery is down, and all that kind of stuff, and keeping track of that, and the sets, and all of that is very complicated. Well, not so complicated, but you need to be paying attention to it. Otherwise, you're going to lose tissue moving into the shot, right?
For sure, man. No, there's definitely a lot that goes into prepping somebody for a competition, and even just the gen pop people. There can be a lot going on in terms of outside stresses, and that troubleshooting and problem solving is definitely a big part of it. So let's step back into your story a little bit, Bryan. In terms of competing, when did you first step on a bodybuilding stage? And then why don't you just talk a little bit about that competition history, if you don't mind?
Sure. The first time I ever competed, I don't know, years ago, I was in college, and I broke my arm snowboarding. I was really into snowboarding when I was younger too. I would like snowboard 50 plus times a year. It was a big part of my life until I hurt myself enough times that I have no desire to ever snowboard or ski again. My kids want to do it, I'll watch from the hot tub, like they can go, but I've hurt myself too many times. And like I said, it was a big part of my life. So broke my arm snowboarding for the last time snowboarding. And because I've done it 4 times, I've broken just my arms. And some of my friends at the gym, they were doing a bodybuilding show, and I said that I could do one in 6 months, even though I had a cast on, and ended up doing one in 6 months from then, and liked it a lot. And the first 3 shows I did were natural shows. Even though the first was a natural show, and then the other 2 I did natural, and even though it was in the NPC, to see if I'd like it, and then went from there. Then the next really good show that I did was Atlantic States, which is at that time it was in Tribeca, and that was the hardest show that I could do at that time. And I want to say I was like at the end of the first call out, but there was like 40 people in that class. So did a couple more shows, took a break from it until I moved to Texas. And then I didn't know anybody because at that time I was just working from home, still for that software company. So the only friends that I knew were from the gym. So I ended up doing a show that was in Houston, Branch Warren Classic, and did that, and then did a bunch of other shows in Texas until the last one that I did was North Americans, which I just placed 3rd at in Supers. So started off as a light heavyweight. I started off as middleweight, light heavy, competed as a heavyweight, and then this last 2 times I was a super. There's no way I can ever make heavyweight again.
So when you did your first competition, were you kind of hooked, or did you kind of have to take a step back and be like, okay, do I really want to do this? What was your mindset after that first competition?
I was pretty hooked on it. I know I was going to do it forever. I just liked the process of it. The same thing we were talking about before, the problem solving and just watching your body change and the discipline of it. I just enjoyed.
So at what point in this bodybuilding process did pursuing that IFBB Pro card kind of come to the forefront and become something that you want to accomplish? Or has it always kind of just been to focus on developing a physique?
I think both. The answer is both. I always have put myself in the position where I've tried to compete against people. Anything that I've done in my life, competing wise or business or whatever, is I'm pretty much self-taught. So I guess there's 2 ways of thought, right? You could either wait until you're good enough and then compete in that level, or you could just jump into the hardest thing that you could possibly do, see where you're at, and then assess from there, right? So even like when, and we're talking about training, right? So when I was like a kid, like before I even could drive, it's like, okay, I want to go be a bodybuilder, right? So what's the best gym that I can get to reasonably it was a Pollen gym in New Jersey, right? In Edison, New Jersey, where there's like real bodybuilders. Like, okay, I'm going to be the smallest, weakest person there, but that's going to make me the best, right? So, and then in terms of bodybuilding, it was, okay, what is the biggest show that I can do? It was like the first biggest show was Atlantic States. And then, I did nationals before I was ready to turn pro, but I needed to assess where I was at, right? And then, up until, and I just kept doing that. And, and then people who I train with, I've trained with the best in the world. And I have a very good idea about what you need to be the best in the world, because I've been around those people for years now. And those people take advice from me too. It's not just, I'm training with them. It's, I'm running the workout for these people. So I have a very good idea, and it's gotten to the point where it's okay. I truly believe that I'm getting my pro card next month, because I was close last time, close enough that if I changed a couple things, I would have gotten it. And I am already significantly better than I was, because I hadn't competed in 2 years, and just being this lean for this long, just in a better position.
So what was the 2-year break from competing about? Was that just for specifically growing, or was that because of the transition down to Texas, or a combination of things?
Just to grow, because I've lived in Texas for 5 years now, almost 6 years now. So it was just, I needed to grow, and COVID happened, so it was convenient. And I was concentrating on concentrating on my training partner and getting him to the Olympia. And I figured as long as we went down that path, then I'd be better. And I wanted to, next time I stepped on stage, to be significantly better. And I was. So it was time to grow, which is tough sometimes, right? People say they're going to do that, but then they don't come back 20 pounds heavier like I did.
So what does a growing season look like? Obviously, I know there's a lot that goes into it, but in terms of eating, what does it look like? In terms of training, what does it look like? And this is kind of more geared towards, maybe that listener that is younger in bodybuilding. They aren't maybe educated and versed as much as you are, and some of the other guests I've brought on. But, just from watching your content, I know that training is a big focus. But in terms of eating, in terms of training, what did you do, and what does somebody need to do in terms of progressing and putting on that lean tissue?
Being consistent and not missing anything, right? I haven't not had 6 meals a day in 10 plus years, so even on vacation, family events, off season, I'd bring a cooler with all my food, and off season, I'd get extra food. And if I wanted to eat a muffin or something like that, I would eat it on top of my meals, but I would make sure that I get at least what I needed every single day. And I'd make sure that I got all my training in when I needed to get my training in. And, just kept track of everything. So, and that, it's a little bit easier when that's what your life is, and all your friends, that's what they do. So, I'm not hanging out with people that are going out and partying and drinking and stuff. So, that's what I do every day. And my wife works a ton. So, I have that time to train and to eat and do all that kind of stuff. And that's what I enjoy doing. So I think like somebody that's younger, it's about being consistent and understanding that anybody who you look up to that's good, has been doing it for 10 to 15 years. And anybody that I know that's good has been doing it for at least that long. It just takes a long time.
How does your training change or evolve going from, contest prep into an off season? And again, this is kind of geared more towards, the younger listener, somebody that doesn't really have a lot figured out in terms of bodybuilding or competing or putting on size. What does that look like? So let's say somebody just got done competing in their first competition. They want to put on some more lean tissue. What do they need to focus on in terms of their training?
I think they need to take a step back and assess their physique at first and figure out what do I need to improve, right? So what areas do I need to improve? And you can't at that point say, most people are like, well, everything. That's too much, right? So pick 2 body parts that you want to improve and have the focus be on that. And I would say between contest and off season, definitely the better your recovery, the more volume you can handle. The worse your recovery, the less volume. So most people, when they're getting ready for a contest, they want to increase the volume because either they don't want to do as much cardio, or they think that that's what's going to get them the cuts, or, but really what you need to be doing is your recovery's down, you need to lower the volume. So, off season is the time when you're doing drop sets, rest pause sets, extended sets, stuff like that. So I would say, if you're in the off season and you're eating in a surplus and your recovery is up and you're keeping track of your lifts from week to week, and it's not just, kill yourself on this day, because that might affect what is going to happen the rest of the week or going forward, right? So you want to be able to track it so you are better next week, not just murdering yourself so then you can't be better next time, right? So if I'm in a position where I'm doing a back off set, and that back off set is a rest pause set, and the next week I come to it and on my top set I'm down a couple reps, I might pull that rest pause set and just make it a straight back off set. Or if I'm getting ready for a contest, I might just pull the back off sets out, depending on how am I progressing on the top sets. I want to at least, especially in a contest environment, to I'm fighting to keep at least my numbers the same, right? And if you're in a surplus, there's no reason why they shouldn't be going up, or at least staying the same and improving your form, right? Because improving your form is still a step forward. So I would say that would be the difference, is you can, when you're in a surplus, you can handle more.
So it's kind of going back into your competing. You competed earlier this year in North Americans. You said you got third. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I know you competed in Colorado earlier this year. Was that just to get your national qualification?
Yep. And 2 of my, good friends, they were guest posing for that show. And then also Dylan, who owns Armburst, is awesome dude. And I love that gym. And if there was any other place I'd live in the country, it would be there. I just love that place. So I needed to do I hadn't competed in 2 years, so I needed to do another qualifier, and went up there, won the overall at that show, and then got the guest pose with those 2, which was cool because I got to be up on stage with them, and then also kind of show everybody that I wasn't lacking size next to them either. And then 3 weeks later was North Americans, where I placed third in supers.
So those 2 people you're referring to up in Colorado that you guest posed with, Hunter and Brett, are those the 2?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And I actually lived out in Denver, and Dylan's been a guest. I had a podcast before this podcast, and I did it actually in person I lived out in Colorado, so I actually went to Arm Wrestle and sat in Dylan's office and had him on that podcast, and I had him on this podcast, and I totally agree. One of the coolest, most chill dudes ever, and that gym is definitely legit. So going into North Americans, I'm assuming because your mindset is always I'm assuming focused on winning. You were focused on winning. You probably thought you were going to win. How did you handle getting third place? And then what was your mindset then going forward in terms of competing in nationals?
I thought I was going to win up until finals for sure. I mean, I was happy with the improvements that I made, and I left that show being very happy with, what happened because I was so much better than I ever had been. And that's the thing about bodybuilding, right? You're just competing against yourself. So I was much better and I was happy. And after the show, I honestly wasn't. I was just going to not do another show for at least a year and grow a little bit, because the feedback that I got from the judges was that you're so close. Like, you just need like a little bit more. It was all positive. Like, you look great. You just need like a little bit more. And then also the top three, they pulled us out early at a prejudging, and they actually pulled us to the side and said, it's really close between the three of you. We're going to rejudge you at night. So be, prepared to be rejudged at night. So I came back a little bit tighter than I did in the morning. Sorry, drinking soda. And unfortunately, because I guess the time or whatever, they didn't actually end up rejudging at the finals, which sucked. But it is what it is. And the other feedback was, we definitely noticed you were tighter, but we wanted you fuller. So it's like, okay. And I look at the pictures and I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely flat, like a little bit too flat. But that's also like, when I said there's things I could have changed, the time from when like prejudging started was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and it probably didn't get on stage till like almost 1 o'clock, right? So like the amount of food I had to eat in between there without flattening out was probably like 300 plus grams of carbs during the backstage. And then the same thing with finals, right? Like finals started at 5 or something, and we didn't get on stage till like almost 11. So, you're standing around, and what ends up happening is you flatten out, right? So just knowing that, how much more food I could have handled, because the last couple of shows that I've been to have been pro shows, and they move quick. So just not that much sitting around. Even local shows, you don't sit around that much. But North America is such a big show, and there's so many competitors, especially like the heavyweight and the light heavyweight class. So many people. So, but yeah, I was really happy with how much better I was. And then I told myself, and then I had a lot of positive feedback from like just people messaging me like on Instagram, and like a bunch of people that were like professionals telling me that I have to do nationals, that I'm close. And I told my wife, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to take like a small break because it's in 16 weeks or whatever, right? Because they moved it to December instead of November. So, and the Olympia was exactly 10 weeks away. So like, if I know I am better 10 weeks out, then I'll start dieting again and, start the whole process after Olympia. And Olympia came around, and it was like Monday after Olympia, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to be much better. So started everything.
So when the judges kind of gave you that feedback after North Americans, Bryan, they said, you're this close. You just need a little bit more. Like, was it the fullness? Was it the conditioning? Like, what was that little bit more that they wanted to see from you specifically, so that you can make those adjustments going into nationals?
The impression I got was just a little bit bigger, even though probably weighed more than everybody. I just structurally, I may be bigger. So I think that was the impression I got, was just a little bit more tissue. But at the same time, it was like none of them knew that I put 20 pounds on, you know, and had that break. So, you know, I'm going to be tighter and a couple pounds heavier in December, just because just being in this process for longer, right?
For sure. So I saw on your Instagram that Phil Viz is helping you go into nationals. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's been helping me for a couple of weeks now. So, and he's been a good friend for like a while, and I've definitely bounced some ideas off of him. And when it came to like me deciding to do the show, I was like, hey, I will do it, but I need, you know, you're helping me. And just took a lot of stress off of not having to think as much about stuff, because I've done everything myself for a long time now. And, you know, he has got a lot of, you know, so far it's been extremely similar, his ideas. So that also makes you feel better too, right? When you're on the same page.
So speaking to like some of the, again, going back to some of those, you know, newer bodybuilders, newer competitors, Bryan, when you are looking for a coach, what are some suggestions or recommendations that you have for those listeners?
Pick somebody that you definitely get along with and that you can have a dialogue back and forth with, right? Because at the end of the day, what you really want to be is comfortable with that person and being able to learn, you know, both of you guys learning from each other, right? So, you know, I worked with somebody in the past where it was, I don't really know like how I feel about that. And they just would be like, well, just listen to me. Like, that's the way it is. And that's not how it should be, because they should be able to explain to you very simply why they're doing something, right? So, you know, definitely somebody that's, you know, smart and knows what they're doing and has done stuff themselves. But, you know, it needs to be somebody that you trust and you can have a good dialogue with. And I think sometimes some coaches are afraid to like tell people everything because maybe they don't want to like give away like their secrets or something like that. But if you're good enough, it has nothing to do with that at all. You know, you're good because you have a good eye and you can't teach that. And, you know, if you're smart, then you're doing all the problem solving and stuff like that. So even when it comes to like talking to other coaches and stuff, you know, very open to talking and telling people stuff, because I think that just helps everybody. You know what I mean? Just like the spread of knowledge is really important, because we don't have like a place to really talk about stuff, you know? So
how do you deal with social media, and how do you utilize social media in terms of branding and business and kind of all the things that you can use social media for?
So that's definitely something I need to be better at, because that's the way everything is going. The main thing that I use it for is for just documenting. So like for North Americans, I would post all my progress pictures, but that would be really more for myself. So I can go back and look at it and say, okay, this is where I was at this far out. And I'm not just looking through my pictures on my phone and lying to myself and saying that I was here when I was really here. Does that make sense? Because it's logged and it's you know, it's out there, and I can't go back and lie to myself. So I think that's a really useful tool for it, especially for bodybuilding, and just sharing knowledge and stuff and training. And, you know, you and I got to talk because of it. I have a lot of good friends that I've met through it, and a lot of good connections and talking to people. I mean, you can talk to anybody in the world instantly, just message them. It's awesome. So, you know, that's really what I try to use it for, is, you know, communicating, educating, stuff like that. And with Instagram, I been spending the last couple of days trying to figure out like what I want to do, because I want to do like YouTube just for myself. And even if it's just like raw, just putting more information out there for training and stuff like that. And just get out there, man. Just try to put out as much information as possible.
Business wise, has Instagram been a pretty big asset for you in terms of clients and online training, or not so much?
Yeah, all my people have come through Instagram for sure. So without it, then I mean, there's definitely, I don't train anybody in person. I used to, but it's not scalable. And I really don't have time to either, you know, so yeah, no, it's been everything with it in terms of business wise.
So this kind of, you know, goes right in with the social media, because that's kind of how we see the world nowadays, for better or for worse, but especially within fitness, within bodybuilding, within competing. Bryan, you know better than I know that that's kind of how we see like other competitors, or, you know, what have you. So when you are in a prep like you are right now, and you're focused on earning your IFBB Pro card, are you solely focused on yourself, or do you get on IG sometimes and you go look at some of the other guys that you're going to be competing against? What does that look like for you personally?
I definitely do that, but not so much to like compare myself. Like I know some people do that, but to try to like befriend them, because at the end of the day, this is a really difficult sport, and it would suck if you didn't do it with your friends, right? So like I've met a lot of good friends. Example, during the Olympia, I trained with Matt Berzikoff. I know I'm competing against him, and had a great session. I have, you know, a good friend now that I wouldn't have had if it wasn't for social media. And yeah,
So what's your long-term goal or long-term vision for bodybuilding? After you receive your IFBB Pro card, what is your vision? What is your goal? What is your dream?
That's a really good question. I want, at the end of the day, so I definitely want to compete as a pro, because like I said, I'm going to continue doing this as long as I'm continuing to progress and it's still fun. And at the end of the day, whenever I'm done with all of this, I want to be able to say that I'm one of the best coaches in the world, that I have coached Olympians, that I've gotten all these people in shape, that I am a pro, I've gotten myself into shape. So I really want to be able to say all of that at the end of the day, if that makes sense. Absolutely,
it makes sense. Do you want to compete on the Olympia stage, or is that not a focus of yours?
It's not really a focus.
It is, or it isn't?
I've never really given it a thought, to be honest with you. Ever at the moment, I'm like really focused on getting the pro card, and you know, I know there's people that are like way better than me, and I know what it takes. So I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I think it can happen, but like I said, the coaching part is what I enjoy. Definitely what I enjoy the most. So we'll see. Probably.
Well, I'm going to say it for you. How about that? And then you can come back in a few years and listen to this episode and be like, that dude that had the podcast from Iowa, he called it. But no, I believe you will step on an Olympia stage. You know what I mean, Bryan? And it'll definitely happen, man. Now, I want to ask you in regards to coaching. We'll start wrapping things up here in a minute, because I know you've got a lot going on. You're in prep. But in terms of looking up to people within the coaching space, is there anybody you know, that maybe it's not right now, but maybe in the past, right? Like, I don't care how hardcore you are or I am or people think they are, like there's always somebody. That's why I like to ask that first question about our favorite bodybuilders, right? There's always somebody in the beginning or at some point, whether it's a bodybuilder, a coach, or, you know, somebody that's maybe ahead of us that we kind of look up to, we respect, we admire. So within the coaching space, has there been somebody like that, or is there somebody like that?
So the first person that I actually ever asked for advice for years ago was John Meadows. And, you know, he's definitely a really good example of somebody that has done everything that I want to do. Yeah, he'd be the biggest one for sure.
Talk about the Gasp family and what it means to be a part of that family, be a part of that brand and that company.
It's awesome, man. It's very different from other companies where you really do feel like, you know, they say family, but you really do feel like a family. The last time that I was up there this past week, and you know, I couldn't make it up for this past weekend because it was Halloween and I got kids and stuff. So I went up Wednesday and Thursday and shot content for them and did a bunch of like catalog stuff for them. But then, you know, Michael, the owner, had me over for dinner and smoked cigars and hung out. And, you know, I've known all those people for years now. It's pretty awesome. So it's just a really cool environment. I wish that gym was here in Houston so I could spend more time there. But, you know, I'm going to be up there twice a month just to do more stuff with them, just because I want more involvement with them and because it's fun and do feel like a family with everybody there. It's awesome. So and clothing, man. I've been wearing the clothing for years, even beforehand. So it's not even like I'm repping something I don't like, which makes it better too. You know, I'm wearing like all gas stuff now, and I didn't do it on purpose. So
just kind of in closing here, I want to ask you about your wife. You've obviously brought her up. You mentioned medical school and residency, so I'm assuming she's a doctor, but just talk about, you know, how she kind of is an integral part of your bodybuilding and just what she means to you and your daughters.
I'd have nothing if it wasn't for her, to be honest. We've been together for 10 years. We actually just celebrated 10 years from we've been together. And then this December, we'll be married for 5 years. She's a podiatrist, so that's what she does. So foot doctor. So anything that happens below your knee, she deals with like diabetics to broken ankles, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like bodybuilding, I mean, she's supportive to the point where she's taken every single progress picture I've ever had. I wake her up early in the morning to take all my pictures, every single one. And not just because, you know, I need somebody to take the pictures, because I could set up a tripod, but she has a good eye and she knows exactly what she's looking at this point because, you know, she's been there from when I started bodybuilding, taking all my pictures. She's been there from, you know, I met Hunter at his first bodybuilding show, so she's seen that whole thing. She's seen the whole thing, you know, Patrick Moore is a close friend and seen through his preps and other pro bodybuilder preps and has a good eye. So, you know, in terms of all that, and she's also much smarter than me, so I don't have to explain anything to her in terms of all the pharmacology and all this stuff. And honestly, a lot of that stuff I ask her questions about because she is smarter than me and she knows all that kind of stuff. And also that keeps me in check and being responsible in that field. So yeah, I think when you, in terms of marriage, you got to pick somebody that's like a partner and balances you out. And that's definitely who she is. So also, you know, awesome mother. We have 2 kids together and it's a pretty wild experience.
So the last question that I have for you, Bryan, speaking and going back to your daughters, what is kind of like that one thing that you want them, not necessarily to remember about you, but what is something that you want to instill in them and leave with them as they get older?
That's a difficult question. A lot. Instill with them. I mean, I just want them to experience things, you know. It seems to be, as we're going down whatever path that we're going down, that it's going to be more and more difficult for children to be social and compete against each other and do things, right? So I think it's really important as a development thing for children to compete and socialize. So one thing that I make a huge effort of doing and going to continue is, you know, putting them in situations where that's true. So either like, you know, being in school and picking schools that are more outgoing, right? Or like traveling a lot, you know, so we're getting an RV and we're going to go travel the country, you know, and see stuff like that. And it's like, you know, that's how you get your children to have advantages, is to expose them to things, because I feel like going forward, less and less children are going to be exposed to things. So the ones that you're making an effort to expose them to things are going to get ahead, if that makes sense. Because we're almost like trying to like prevent that from happening these days. Not trying to get like all political on you on this, but, you know, I just think that to give my children an advantage is more so trying to expose them to as much as possible.
Excellent, man. I love that. That's those are definitely some words of wisdom. So, Bryan, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast, ma'am. I know you're deep in prep and there's a lot going on, but I really appreciate your time. I want to give you the opportunity, if you have any final thoughts or any final words you want to leave with the listeners and myself, I would appreciate that. And then outside of that, where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? And anything else that you'd like to put out there, you can do that at this time.
I just want to thank you, man. This is fun. I really enjoyed doing this. I'd be definitely down to do it again if you had time. In terms of how you can find me on Instagram, Bryan Troy, or The Standard Training Systems, which is the training company that I have. And, you know, it's the Standard Training Systems at gmail.com, or you can go on that Instagram. Yeah, I'm going to try to put out more stuff and be out there more and do more stuff like this. And, you know, when you contacted me, I jumped at it because I want to get out there more. So I really appreciate you having me on, and, you know, I look forward to doing this again. So thank you.
And you're very welcome. And how about this? After you get your pro card at Nationals, we'll bring it back on. We'll chop it up about that. Maybe some more in-depth training, nutrition stuff. Does that sound good?
100%.
Okay, cool, man.
100%.
All right, Bryan, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And listeners, and those of you tuning in through YouTube, I just want to thank you so very much once again for joining us on another episode of Behind the Muscle Podcast. As I continue to say and will continue to say, if it wasn't for you guys, the podcast wouldn't exist. So I'm grateful and I'm thankful for you continuing to support the podcast, continuing to listen and watch. 2 favors I would ask of you, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube. That is important because I release all of these episodes first on YouTube, and then I shoot them out to the rest of the podcast platforms. So if you want to stay up on all these episodes, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 episodes that I'm putting out per week, if you want to be on top of all of those episodes, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Another favor I would ask for you guys, please take this episode of Bryan's, share it on all of your social media platforms. Make sure you tag Bryan, make sure you tag Behind the Muscle so that we know you listened and you found value specifically in Bryan's episode. If you are on YouTube right now and you're listening to this or watching this episode, why don't you go ahead and go down to the comment section and just leave your favorite takeaway or the best piece of advice or just something that you got from Bryan's story today. Maybe you just want to give Bryan some encouragement as he closes in on nationals, going after that pro card. Just go ahead and leave those comments in the comment section on YouTube. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.